SHMITERS, take one. This is the Squidfish. This is keelfin fish, typically 20 to 21 inches wide. One of the main features of this board is the deck contour. It's got a solid deck chine or a hard line on the top of the rail band. But what's going on in between that is you got a subtle concave up here in the nose. And as that progresses towards the tail, the concave comes out of it and it's a very subtle crown with, it's pretty much a flat deck with a banded rail. And what that does to the volume of this board is it really pulls it out to the rails. Having the volume way out on the rails adds a ton of stability. So for the Squidfish, it's super advantageous to ride it small. When I came up with the Squidfish design, I was coming off a 5'10" fish and trying to push it all the way down to 4'11" and making it compact so that I could slow it down. Fishes are super fast, speedy boards, and sometimes trying to slow them down is a tall ask. So this is a way that I contoured the deck to make it so that I could ride a tiny little board. The deck shape on this board, one of the things about it is it just complements the shape. It's just, for me, aesthetically looks really nice in this shape and offers just a lot of stability and ability to ride a board that dimensionally would be really small, but volume-wise might actually have as much foam as a much bigger board. This one is the Bloth model. Similar to the squid, it's a keelfin fish, around 21 inches wide, but the main difference in this board is the deck contour. Up front here you can see that it's got a pretty solid amount of crown in the deck. If we put a straight edge on it, you can see that it's got probably over a half an inch, 3/4 of an inch of foam removed from the top of this rail band, as opposed to here in the center line. And as that comes back from the nose, as we get towards the tail, it gets a little more gradual. And then into the tail, it's got a concave. So the contouring is pretty much the opposite of the squid, but with a much more dramatic crown in this front end of the board. And what that does is it hides your volume here in the center of the board. You're going to get a much thicker thickness measurement out of the stringer line of this board. And the volume's placed here, which would be right underneath the center of your foot, giving you more leverage against the rail, making it easier to initiate turns, easier to roll it up on rail and keep it there. The concave in the tail is still trying to keep that stability feeling in the board, but just changing where that's placed. It's just back where your back foot's going to be when you're really trying to turn the board quickly, when you're getting way back over the fins, and you're going to find that concave zone where the volume's out to the rails, making it more stable. And how it progresses towards that also makes this little flip contour into the tail, which kind of gives you something to push against when you're going into a turn and you're doing a last minute adjustment with your foot to kind of set it in above the fins. That contour is going to hopefully catch your foot and give you a nice place to just put all your weight and hopefully come out with a really nice turn. But yeah, this is the Bloth model. the Squid has been a really popular board for me, and this one in similar proportions is able to be ordered a lot thicker, with a center thickness being the measurement that we're using to get thickness. This board's 2 5/8 right here, and the last one I showed you, the Squid, is 2 3/8. So that's a 1/4 inch difference. But the rail volume on this board is way less, so it's gonna be a more sensitive board for the dimensions. And this deck contouring thing is something that's been pretty entertaining to me here in the shaping bay. It's just like a fun thing to keep these lines and just kind of move the volume around in a different flow. I'm always checking the center stringer line to make sure that my rockers are clean, and then getting to play with these rail lines outside of that and how they work with one another is something that's super fun for me in the shaping bay, and I've like based a lot of different designs off that relationship between the stringer line and these rail bands here in the fishes, especially because having the rail bands really complements the shapes. This is a block that I've ridden a bunch. I've ridden it so much that you no longer can tell that there's a concave in the tail, and the cratering in the deck is pretty heavy. But that's another feature that over the lifespan of your surfboard, like once you get your dents set into it, it's actually giving you, you know, a familiar riding point, and you become familiar with the board as you start to set your dents in it. Fishes especially, they're usually so short that sometimes to do turns or in certain situations you end up creeping like way back, even spanning the swallowtail with your foot. And so it's nice to have the dents or to have some sort of contour that's stable and a place where you can find your footing on them. But yeah, this is a block that you can see I've crept way up the board, but still kind of surf it from the tail like your typical fish. This is a Squid. This is a newer one, so it's not quite as dented up, but you can see that this one's, you know, getting heel dents like way back here, and that they're not creeping up too far. It's kind of ridden from a fixed position, but yeah, just to give you an idea of what one looks like glassed here under the shaping lights after a couple sessions. Now I'm going to move on to the narrower fishes in my line. This is the Cuttlefish. This has been a popular board and my favorite for your average California surf. More so than the Squidfish, just because of the added sensitivity in going an inch narrower overall, and also the added like pivot from running a more high aspect fin as opposed to the directional stability that you get from like the big base keel fin that'll run on the Squid or the Bloth model. The Cuttlefish is very similar in contour to the Squid. I was kind of, you know, just putting the design features from the Squid into a little bit narrower, more stretched out package when I came up with the Cuttlefish. So yeah, it's got that concave scoop out of the nose zone. And as that progresses, it comes into the more like hidden crown with the appearance of a flat deck. It's still got a slightly higher stringer to the top of this rail band, especially on boards like this where they're a little bigger and a little thicker. I find it nice to drop the top of this band from the center line to distribute a little bit of the volume, so we're still able to hit like common numbers like 2 5/8 and stuff with this board without it feeling overly clunky here in the rail, but this board is 2 5/8 and you can tell that it does have quite a beefy feel to it here in the rail band, and that's because, as you can see by the deck shape, the volume's not distributing that quickly. It's not getting foiled out by having it be all crowned. So for this board, I would recommend it being ridden by someone who's heavy or someone who's not comfortable on a real sensitive board. You're going to get a lot of stability out of, you know, numbers on an order card that aren't that huge. You know, this board's 5'10", 2 5/8, 20 inches wide, but it's a big board and it packs a ton of volume because of the deck contouring being so flat throughout. It's carrying a whole bunch of foam all the way out to the rails. And also nose to tail, it's got a pretty solid amount of volume flowing all the way off each end. I like this one for flatter face waves where you're doing big open face turns, and it also grovels really well in small waves. And this one is the straight cut fish. It's a pretty new design. The Bloth has been around for a while. That's the first one. I shaped that one in probably 2014. But this one is taking a lot of the same deck contouring features from the Bloth. It's got that pretty heavy crown, or, you know, quick foiling of volume off the front end of this board, coming down all the way from the nose and approaching the tail. It starts to mellow out and pretty abruptly flips to a concave contour just right out the last 8 inches of the board. I thought it was a fun way to foil the deck on a little compact fish for the reason of having the ability to pack more volume up here, keeping it sensitive by crowning the deck a bit and centralizing that volume right underneath the middle of your foot, but then having this concave contour out the back end. When you start getting real high performance, your foot starts to slip way back here, back behind the fins almost, and the concave, as it comes up in the tail, also gives the tail a little rise in the deck line, and it gives you something to push against. So I really like the way that that feature flows and works with this design. The straight cut fish being different from the cuttlefish, in the outline, instead of it being a side cut here, it's just straight. So that's where I came up with the straight cut name. I don't know, maybe it's even curved. Yeah, I shaped this one a bit, so this one's got a little curve, but it's very similar proportions to the cuttlefish as far as nose width, center width, tail width. And the main difference is that deck contouring feature. This one will be more sensitive and be able to pack a little bit more volume too. So if you're looking to size up a cuttlefish, or really get a lot more thickness out of the center of a cuttlefish, if you're wanting to order it like 2 5/8 or whatever, I would strongly recommend the straight cut fish, or, you know, this sort of a deck contouring where it's got a lot of crown here and graduates into the concave off the tail. I feel like having concave somewhere in the board gives them that unique kind of skatey feel, whether it's on your back foot only or if it's kind of more throughout the whole deck like the cuttlefish. I just like the way concave decks complement a fish shape and the way that you ride a fish shape. Alright, this is the toe. This model is meant to be sized down as much as you're comfortable. For me, I ride a 5.0.5 by 19 3/8 by 2 1/4, and I'm 6'1", 165, so this board's like you know, a solid foot shorter than me, but it still paddles really good. One of the main things that makes it paddle good is the low rocker and also the volume carrying all the way out the tail here. Having a low rocker with thickness flowing all the way out the tail helps get the board up and planing at a low speed that you might be able to reach with your own two hands when you're paddling. So this board's like, for how tiny it is, it paddles pretty good, and yeah, since it's just such a compact board, it's really advantageous to have that flat deck to add to control and to also disperse a little thickness all the way out here onto the rails. So even though dimensionally with a tape measure you're only getting it 19 inches wide and you're only measuring 2 1/4 thickness in the middle, I'd be curious to compare the volume to like a 6.0 that's really foiled, that thins out really quickly on both ends. It'd probably, you know, have a similar amount of volume to a 6.0 shortboard. This is the Slim Squid or Skinny Squid. It's a take off the Squidfish, but this is a stretched out version. A lot of people want to ride a fish, but they're ordering them, you know, the size of a mid-length or something in the 7-foot range. And in the past, I've done a lot with the same flat deck just because it just looks really nice to have that rail band. But this one's a crown deck and pretty heavily crowned back here in the riding surface of the board where you're going to be standing. And for a 6'3" fish, for me, it's really sensitive and able to turn real sharp, and it sits on rail really nice. And I think that's a lot to do with the deck shape on this, and, you know, centralizing the thickest part of the board down the middle, and, you know, having less volume here to try to have to leverage against to keep it up on rail. It really foils out a ton because of its width. It's 21 inches wide, so from 2.5 here in the center to very chippy on the rails, you have like a nice, even, gradual, subtle deck contour. And as opposed to the 5.0 toe where I'm riding a tiny little board, this is a way upsized board, and it's really foiled, and that makes it really easy for me to surf something that's way larger dimensionally than what I would typically surf. So the deck contouring definitely has a lot to do with your ability to control it, and the deck contour is the part that you're on all the time, so I think it has a lot to do with the way the board feels.
Should we cut?
Yeah, let's cut.